She wore white to his engagement party. That was the detail everyone remembered later. Not the venue, not the string. Lights draped across the rooftop terrace of the Fairmont in downtown Toronto. Not even the way Dominic Hale's face lost all its color when the elevator doors opened. What they remembered was the white, and the fact that she smiled. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 7 years earlier, Celeste Ashford had married Dominic Hale on a Tuesday afternoon in a courthouse on University Avenue. No guests, no flowers, no photographer. He'd told her it was romantic, just the two of them, no distractions, and she'd believed him because she was 23, and he had a way of making his preferences sound like poetry. The truth, which she wouldn't fully understand until much later, was simpler. Dominic didn't want witnesses, not for the ceremony itself, but for the years that came after. The ones where he slowly, methodically, without ever raising his voice, convinced Celeste that she wasn't quite enough. Not quite smart enough for his colleagues at the firm. Not quite polished enough for the company dinners. Not quite sharp enough to manage their finances, to have opinions about their investments, to do anything more complex than smile when spoken to and nod when he explained things. He never called her stupid. He was far too careful for that. He'd say things like, "Don't worry about it, babe, this stuff is complicated," when she asked about their mortgage. Or, "You're more of a creative type, right? Leave the numbers to me." Always warm. Always reassuring. Always quietly building a cage out of kindness. By the time she was 28, Celeste couldn't remember the last time she'd made a decision without checking his face first. The separation happened on a Sunday in November. Celeste came home from the grocery store to find Dominic sitting at the kitchen table with a folder. Inside was a separation agreement, already drafted, already reviewed by his lawyer, a man she'd never met but whose name she recognized from the firm's holiday cards. "I've met someone," Dominic said. He said it the way you'd announce a change in dinner plans. "Her name is Waverly. She's a junior associate." Celeste stood in the doorway holding 2 bags of groceries. The milk was getting warm. "I've been fair," he continued, sliding the folder toward her. "You get the car, $60,000 from the joint account, and 6 months in the condo before you need to find somewhere else." She looked at the papers. Looked at him. Looked at the kitchen she'd painted herself 2 summers ago. The sage green he'd said was a bit much, but she'd loved anyway. "That's fair?" she said. "More than fair. Celeste, you didn't bring anything into this marriage. I'm being generous." She set the groceries down. She signed the papers that afternoon. Not because she agreed. Because she'd spent 5 years learning that arguing with Dominic Hale was like arguing with weather. It happened to you. You couldn't change it. You could only decide how wet you wanted to get. She left with the car, a suitcase, and the $60,000 he considered generous. She did not take the sage green walls. For the first 3 months, Celeste lived in a basement apartment in Leslieville that smelled faintly of cat litter despite the absence of any cat. She worked double shifts at a cafe on Queen East, not because she needed every dollar, though she did, but because the noise helped. The espresso machine, the door chime, the steady human rhythm of strangers ordering flat whites and asking for oat milk. Iris, her oldest friend, came by every Thursday evening with takeout and the kind of aggressive optimism that only lifelong best friends are allowed to deploy. "You know what you should do?" Iris said one night, cross-legged on Celeste's futon, chopsticks in hand. "That thing you were always talking about. The candles." Celeste almost laughed. During the marriage, she'd spent her evenings making candles. Hand-poured, scented with essential oils she mixed herself. Bergamot and cedar, lavender and black pepper. She'd given them to friends, to neighbors, to Iris's mother, who once said they were the only thing that helped her sleep after her hip replacement. Dominic had called it her little hobby. He said it the way people say "bless her heart" in the South, with a smile that carried a footnote. "I'm serious," Iris said. "You had something there. People loved them. People were being polite, Celeste. My mother literally asked me to steal more from your house. That's not polite. That's demand." Celeste looked at the bag of wax and oils she'd brought from the condo, tucked into the corner of her tiny kitchen like contraband. She hadn't touched them since the move. She picked up the bergamot oil that night. She didn't sleep. By morning, she'd poured 40 candles. What happened next was the kind of story that sounds fabricated when you tell it at dinner parties, which is why Celeste rarely told it. She started selling at a weekend market in the distillery district. A woman bought 6 and came back the next week with her sister, who ran a boutique hotel in Niagara-on-the-Lake. The hotel wanted an exclusive scent for their rooms. Celeste made one, a blend of fig leaf and white tea that smelled like the moment before rain, and they ordered 300 units. Then a lifestyle blogger featured them. Then a department store buyer showed up at her market stall in a camel coat and left with her card. Then Drake's people called, which in Toronto might as well be a papal decree. By the end of year 1, Ashford & Co. had a production studio in a converted warehouse in the Junction and a wholesale contract with a national retailer. By year 2, Celeste had moved into fragrance. Perfumes, room sprays, a limited edition collaboration with a Japanese incense maker that sold out in 11 minutes online. By year 3, the company had expanded into the U.S. market, opened a flagship store on Queen West, and been valued at $92 million. Celeste had gone from a basement apartment that smelled like phantom cats to a office that smelled like whatever she decided it should smell like. She never once called Dominic to tell him. And Dominic, in the way of men who only pay attention to the things that confirms their own stories, never thought to look. He was too busy telling people what had happened to his first affair. She took it hard, he'd say at cocktail parties, shaking his head with practiced sympathy. Some people just don't have the tools to move on, you know? I feel for her, honestly. He told this story to colleagues, to clients, to Waverly's parents over Thanksgiving in their Rosedale dining room, where Waverly's mother had nodded and said, "Poor dear," and Dominic had allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He told it so often that he believed it completely. Celeste was somewhere in the city, working retail probably, maybe waitressing, stuck in the amber of their failed marriage while he ascended. It was a comfortable story. It made the divorce his achievement, and her stagnation his evidence. He had no idea. The engagement party was Waverly's idea. She wanted something elegant but relaxed, something that said, "We're celebrating but we're not showy about it." She chose the Fairmont rooftop because her firm had a corporate account. She planned the guest list carefully. 80 people, mostly from the firm, some family, a few friends who could be trusted not to get sloppy. It was Dominic who added one name at the bottom. He did it without telling Waverly. He wrote the invitation himself, on a card separate from the printed batch, and included a note in his own handwriting. "Thought you might like to see how things turned out." He sent it to her old address. The condo, not realizing she'd left 3 years ago. The building's concierge, a man named Alistair who had always liked Celeste more than Dominic, forwarded it to Iris, who forwarded it to Celeste. Celeste read it standing at the window of her corner office. The Toronto skyline stretched out behind her. She read it twice, set it down. Then she picked up her phone. Knox? Yeah, clear my Friday evening. Knox Merritt had been her head of security for 18 months. He was ex-RCMP 6'4", built like a shipping container, and possessed of a preternatural ability to read Celeste's moods from across a room. He appeared in her office doorway 4 seconds after the call ended. "No," he said. "I haven't said anything yet. You've got the look?" "What look?" "The one where you're about to do something calm and devastating." She held up the invitation. He read it. His jaw tightened. "He sent this to you." He did, to an engagement party, for his new fiancée with a handwritten note. Knox set the card down. "What's the play?" "No play," Celeste said. "I'm going to a party. You're going to his party." She turned back to the window. "Knox, what do I always say?" He exhaled. "You don't attend events. You conclude them. Get the team ready." Celeste spent 3 hours choosing what to wear. Not because she was indecisive. She ran a company that dealt in aesthetics. She could dress in her sleep. But because every choice needed to say the right thing without saying anything at all. She chose white. A floor-length silk dress, clean lines, no embellishment. The kind of white that isn't bridal but makes you think about weddings anyway. Which was exactly the point. No statement jewelry. Small diamond studs that had been a gift to herself on the company's first anniversary. Hair pulled back, natural, effortless in the way that required 2 hours of effort. She looked at herself in the mirror of her King West loft and saw a woman she hadn't known existed 5 years ago. Iris sat on the bed behind her, phone in hand, ready to coordinate. "You sure about this?" Iris asked. "I'm sure about me," Celeste said. "That's enough." The black SUVs pulled up to the Fairmont at 7:42 p.m., 3 vehicles. Because Knox never worked with fewer than 3. They moved through the hotel's underground parking and took the service elevator to the rooftop. Knox stepped out first, then Theo and Malik, his 2 senior operatives, fanning out with the quiet efficiency of people trained to see threats in flower arrangements. Then Celeste. She didn't pause for effect. She didn't scan the crowd. She simply stepped onto the rooftop terrace and walked toward the bar like she'd been there 100 times. The reaction was not immediate. It was gradual, like a ripple. A woman near the railing nudged her husband. "Who is that?" He didn't know. A junior associate from Dominic's firm pulled out her phone, Googled something, and whispered to the person next to her. That person's eyes went wide. Dominic was at the far end of the terrace, standing with Waverly and her parents, when the noise of the party shifted. Not louder, not quieter, just different. The way a room changes when someone enters who isn't supposed to be there, or who belongs there more than anyone expected. He turned. Celeste was standing at the bar, accepting a glass of sparkling water, not champagne, and listening to something the bartender was saying with what appeared to be genuine interest. Knox stood 6 feet behind her, hands folded, watching the room the way a lighthouse watches the sea. Dominic's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "Who's that?" Waverly asked, following his gaze. She was wearing an emerald cocktail dress and had spent the last hour being exactly the kind of hostess she'd planned to be. Poised. Warm. In control. She was not in control of this. "Nobody," Dominic said. But nobody didn't arrive with a 3-person security detail and the posture of someone who owned the building. And Waverly, who had graduated top of her class and made partner in 4 years, was not a woman who accepted nobody as an answer. "Dominic, it's fine. That's not an answer, it's my ex-wife." The word landed between them like a glass breaking. Waverly stared at him. "Your ex-wife? The one who, what did you say, works at a cafe?" "I said she was struggling." "She doesn't look like she's struggling, Dominic. She looks like she arrived in a motorcade." The whispers had reached critical mass now. In Toronto's business circles, Ashford & Co. was not unknown. It was, in fact, extremely known. The lifestyle press had profiled Celeste 3 times in the past year. Her face had been on the cover of Toronto Life magazine. She'd rung the opening bell at the TSX 6 months ago. At least a dozen people on that rooftop recognized her. A partner from Waverly's firm approached Celeste with an outstretched hand. "Miss Ashford?" "Ronan Webb. I'm a huge admirer of what you've built." "That's very kind," Celeste said. She shook his hand. She was warm. She was present. She did not look toward Dominic even once. Ronan lingered. "We've actually been discussing your expansion into the U.S. market at the firm. Impressive trajectory. We've been fortunate to have a good team. Fortune had nothing to do with it. From what I've read." Celeste smiled. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like you'd said something cleverer than you had. 20 feet away, Dominic's mother, Lorraine Hale, was watching from a high-top table near the railing. Lorraine was 68, silver-haired, and possessed of a bullshit detector that had been finely calibrated over 4 decades of marriage to a man who talked too much. She set down her wine glass and walked across the terrace. Celeste saw her coming. "Lorraine, Celeste." Lorraine stopped 2 feet away and studied her. The dress, the quiet authority, the security detail arranged like chess pieces across the terrace. The ease of a woman who had nothing to prove and had stopped pretending otherwise. Lorraine's face did something complicated. It started as surprise, passed through something that might have been regret, and settled into a kind of quiet respect that she hadn't intended to show. "You look well," Lorraine said. "I am well. He told us you were struggling. I know what he told you." A beat of silence. The city hummed 40 floors below them. "He's my son," Lorraine said carefully. "But I have eyes." Celeste touched Lorraine's arm. "Brief. Genuine. I never blamed you. I blamed me," Lorraine said quietly. Then she turned and walked back to her table, without looking at Dominic, who had watched the entire exchange from across the terrace, with the expression of a man watching his own house burn from a distance. Waverly found him gripping the railing. "Your mother just hugged your ex-wife." She touched her arm. "Your mother doesn't touch anyone, Dominic. I've known her for 2 years and she's never touched me." "Can we not do this right now, at our engagement party? When exactly should we do it?" "She's just trying to make a scene." Waverly looked across the terrace. Celeste was laughing at something Ronan Webb had said. She looked relaxed. She looked like she was at a garden party, not a battleground. She's not making a scene, Waverly said slowly. She's making you irrelevant. Dominic flinched. It was small. Most people wouldn't have caught it. Waverly caught it. You invited her, Waverly said. The realization arrived on her face like weather. You invited her, didn't you? She didn't crash this party. You sent her an invitation. His silence was the answer. Why, I thought, you thought she'd show up heartbroken and make you feel big. Waverly's voice was steady, but her eyes were not. At our engagement party, Dominic. You used our night to settle a score with your ex-wife. It wasn't like that. What was it like? He opened his mouth. He closed it, because the honest answer, the real one, stripped of the performance, was exactly what Waverly had said. He'd wanted Celeste to see the rooftop and the champagne towers and the beautiful new woman on his arm and feel the particular ache of someone watching everything they'd lost become someone else's celebration. But the woman across the terrace wasn't aching. She wasn't watching. She was being watched. By everyone, and the thing she radiated wasn't pain or bitterness or regret. It was the quiet, unshakable confidence of a person who had built something real while he was busy building a story about her failure. He made his first mistake when he walked over to her. She was standing near the edge of the terrace, looking out at the city. Knox shifted his weight when Dominic approached, but didn't move. Celeste had told him earlier, "He'll come, let him." Celeste. She turned. No flinch, no sharp intake of breath, just her eyes, steady and clear, giving nothing away. Dominic. He stood beside her. The city sprawled beneath them, all light and motion and indifference. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "I have the company. I didn't know. You didn't look." He was quiet for a moment. I know what you thought." She said it without malice. That was the part that cut deepest. There was no anger in her voice, no satisfaction, just clarity. The clean, precise clarity of a woman who had processed him entirely and moved on. "You wrote on the invitation," she said. "Thought you might like to see how things turned out." He said nothing. "I read that line and I thought about what to do for exactly 1 minute." She took a sip of her sparkling water. "The old me would have cried. The version of me you knew. The one you built all your stories around. She would have crumpled that card and spent a week wondering what she did wrong." She looked at him. "But that woman left the day I left that condo, Dominic. You just didn't notice because you were too busy telling everyone she was still there." He felt something shift in his chest. Not guilt, not yet. Something before guilt. The first crack in a wall he'd spent 3 years reinforcing. "I didn't come here to hurt you," she said. "I want you to hear that. I didn't come to make a scene or win something or prove a point." "Then why?" She considered the question, genuinely. "The way you turn a stone over in your hand, before deciding where to set it down." "I came because I needed to know if you still had any power over me." She said it simply. "I needed to walk into a room where you were the center of attention and check whether the old ache was still there. The one that lived in the space between who I was and who you kept telling me I should be. And," she looked at the skyline. "All those lights, all that distance from the basement apartment in Leslieville where she'd poured candles until her hands shook. Gone," she said. "Completely gone." She set her glass on the railing, picked up her clutch. Knox was beside her before she'd straightened. No signal exchanged, just the instinct of someone who'd learned her rhythms. "Your fiancée seems sharp," Celeste said. "Smarter than you deserve, honestly. Don't do to her what you did to me." She turned to leave, then stopped. "There's an envelope on the table by the bar. It's for you." She walked away without looking back. Knox fell into step beside her. Theo and Malik materialized from their positions and formed a loose corridor as she moved toward the elevator. Guests stepped aside without being asked, the way people do when they sense the geometry of a room rearranging itself. At the elevator, the older doorman, not Alistair, a different man, held the door. "Have a good evening, Ms. Ashford." "Thank you. I did." The doors closed. The terrace was quiet for exactly 3 seconds before the conversations erupted. In the SUV, Iris was already on the phone. "Tell the Vancouver team she's confirmed for Monday. Move the Montreal call to 9. And get Hannah on the line about the Tokyo shipment." Celeste leaned her head against the seat. The city slid past outside the tinted windows. She closed her eyes. "Was it worth it?" Iris asked, exactly the what Celeste knew she would. Ask me tomorrow. Ifris nodded. She'd known Celeste long enough to recognize the difference between deflection and processing. This was processing. Dominic found the envelope 40 minutes later. He'd spent those 40 minutes performing toasts, photos, the careful choreography of a man celebrating his best night. But there was a frequency underneath it all now, a low hum of something unresolved, and every time he looked at the spot where Celeste had stood, the hum got louder. He picked up the envelope, ivory stock, embossed with a small, clean A on the seal. Not AM, not a H, just A. She'd shed his name the way you shed a coat you never liked. He opened it at the railing, alone with the city below him. Inside, a single card. Her handwriting. He recognized it immediately, the same neat print that used to leave grocery lists on the fridge, but different now. More confident. The letters didn't apologize for taking up space. 2 lines, thank you for the invitation. I hope you find in this what you were never willing to build in ours. And beneath that, smaller, almost an afterthought. I forgave you before I arrived. That's the only reason I could. He read it 4 times. His best man, a guy named Sterling from the firm, found him at the railing. Hey, Waverly's looking for you. Speeches. Dominic folded the card, slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket, against his chest, and couldn't explain to himself why he put it there. Coming, he said. He walked back to the party, back to the champagne and the string lights and the architecture of an evening designed to announce his success. He smiled. He gave a toast. He held Waverly's hand and said the right things in the right order. But something had changed, not loudly, not dramatically. In the quiet way that foundations shift, invisible until you notice the crack above the door. Waverly noticed. Later that night, in the cab home, she sat on her side of the seat and looked out the window and said, very quietly, "You lied to me about her." It wasn't a question. "It was a long time ago," he said. "It was tonight, Dominic. You lied to me tonight at our party in front of 80 people. You said she was nobody. She's on the cover of magazines." He had no answer for that. There was no angle. No reframing, no version of the story that made him look like anything other than what he was. A man who had needed his ex-wife to be small so that he could feel large, and who had been so committed to that fiction that he'd built his entire narrative around it. Waverly didn't yell. She didn't cry. She looked at him with the particular devastation of a smart woman realizing that the man she'd chosen was not the man she'd been told about. "I need to think," she said. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. But her fingers didn't close around his. Across the city, Celeste was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her loft, looking at the same skyline from a different angle. The lights of the CN Tower pulsed their slow rhythm against the dark. Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't check. Partners. Journalists. The Tokyo team confirming a meeting time. She called her mother. "How was it?" her mother asked. She lived in Sudbury. She'd been waiting by the phone since 6. Celeste watched the city. All those lights burning in the dark, steady and indifferent and beautiful. "He wanted me to see what moving on looks like," she said. A pause. She could hear her mother breathing. "I think I showed him." Another pause. "Longer? And then?" Celeste smiled. It was small and private and belonged only to her. "And then I came home to mine." She stood there for a long time after hanging up. The city kept moving. The lights kept burning. Somewhere out there, Dominic Hale was lying awake next to a woman whose trust he'd cracked, holding a card against his chest that he couldn't put down, replaying a single image. Celeste Ashford standing on a rooftop in white silk, completely whole, completely at peace, looking at the city she'd conquered without once looking at him. He'd spent 3 years telling people she was broken. She'd spent 3 years building an empire, and the most dangerous thing she'd done, the thing that would keep him awake for months, that would sit in the back of his mind during meetings and dinners and quiet moments with a fiancé who now looked at him differently, was show up. Not to compete, not to destroy, not to take anything from him at all. She'd shown up whole, and she'd let that be enough.